Welcome. We are from the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church from this area. My name is Brandt. I've been at the Mount Vernon Church for 34 years now. And I guess as some of you know, if you hang around a church long enough, you do almost everything. I've served in almost every committee. I've been chair of the board twice for two-year terms, and so on and so on. I came here from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I have loved the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church ever since. My colleague is Bill Clontz.
And I'm the kid in the group. I've only been in MVUC for 16 years here. But as Ron said, we're probably like everybody in this room. We've all done several tours of duty. I'm getting ready to start my third board tour here in about a month and been on the program council. Ron was one of our co-founders with us here who started our leadership program. And we thought we'd just share with you a couple things about what we're doing and what's working for us. This is not, pardon the theological reference, God's answer to leadership training, but it's something that's kind of worked for us, and we've gone through several iterations over the last 3 years here, and we just want to share with you what we learned and what seems to be working for us, and hopefully get some good ideas from everyone else as well.
I like to think of myself as the realist, the practical guy in the group. Bill is the visionary and the leader and the positive force. Take it away, Bill.
Boy, how could I lose with a setup like that here? Well, you might ask the question, why would you do your own leadership course here? Well, we did it for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, this is our little slogan, serving those who serve others. As a lot of you probably know from your own experience, sometimes we ask people to come into leadership positions. Excuse me, I'll walk across this. Right? We ask people to come into leadership positions and don't really prepare them to do that. And they have a hard time, and the people that work with them have a hard time, and it's just not a very pleasant experience. But there are also some more practical reasons why we do this too. See if any of these next two slides ring a bell for you here. You call somebody and you say, well, we'd really like you to lead Committee X. Could I come see you maybe Thursday afternoon after work? Let's just talk a little bit about how that might work. This is the answer that you often get.
Oh, yeah.
No, Thursday's out. How about never? Would never be good for you? Or you're hanging around the Commons in coffee hour and you hear these kind of comments. I finally figured out when someone tells you it's no problem, he means for him. It's not a lot of work unless you have to do it. The only reason that anything ever gets done is because there are pockets of competence in every organization. The key is to find them and then exploit the hell out of them. I bet that fits a lot of people in this room here. We are condemned men who are chained and will row in place until we rot, also known as the committee chair leadership policy. And then finally, hey, somebody really should do that. We found we had both of those kind of problems. That people weren't very prepared to be leaders, that they were frequently didn't really understand what they were being asked to do. They were frustrated when they got in, and very often people we thought had real potential just weren't confident enough to do it. So that's why we decided to do a homegrown course. I want to make it clear at the outset, this is not meant to replace anything that's available to you from District or from the UUA. If you can do something at ULT, or if you can do something at one of the Harvest the Power workshops, well, you really ought to do that for a couple of reasons. One, they're very good at this. There's lots of good material. And two, you get that opportunity to mix with people with other congregations, which really is the most important part. It's the reason most of us came to this thing. It wasn't so much of the programs, chance to rub elbows with each other and learn some things here. But not everybody has the time or the money to go do one of the District or the UUA things here. Secondly, we found people really need some specific information based in your congregation. There are things about how you do things in your house that aren't covered in a generic leadership course. And so we found it's worth taking some time just to walk through. This is kind of the way we do things around here, and here's the history of why it's set up that way, so they're more comfortable with that. We thought it gave us a chance to develop a community of leaders, to actually bring people together. Being a leader for a lot of people, particularly if it's their first time, is kind of a lonely enterprise. You feel like you're out there by yourself and you're trying to run the meeting and people may around be working with you. It helps people to understand, hey, every other committee leader and everybody else on the board is having the same sort of problem. And so what we found when we get 8 or 10 of these people together for a course, you sort of have an instant community of leaders, people that sort of got trained up at the same time and got interested in doing this sort of thing at the same time. And they form sort of a community, and it's a little easier for them when they get stuck to call a friend and say, I just really have a problem with this person in my committee. If you run into something like this, can you help me? It just makes them a little easier to do that. There are people that are really intimidated by the idea of being a leader. And what we always tell them on the course, we send them a note and give them a call and say, look, several of us have been talking, we just think you've got some real potential to make a contribution in a leadership position here. How about come taking the course? That's all we're asking you to do. Give us Friday night and Saturday afternoon. And at the end of that, you're comfortable with taking a position, that'd be great. If not, at least you met some nice people and you know how things are going here. Well, people really are very often intimidated by that. We've actually talked about changing the name of the course sometimes because the reaction get, oh, I'm not a leader. Well, that's why we're inviting you to the course. We think you have leadership potential here. But we tell people, look, you don't have to run anything. You can just figure out how things work. You can be a better member if you come to one of these courses. And if you decide you'd like to lead something, it'll be fine. I'll be straightforward and tell you the first probably 3 or 4 of these courses we did, everybody had a good time, but there wasn't a wave of volunteers. The last few courses, just about every time, one of the graduates has come up and said, I'd really like to put this to work. What's out there that I could do? That's gold. That's really what you're looking to do here. But you just want to be comfortable to be able to do that. And this is one component, I'll talk about this a little bit toward the end, of what we call a farm team trying to develop generations of leaders. Yes, ma'am.
How often do you offer the course?
The first 2 years, we did it twice a year, just trying to cover our backlog. We had a lot of people in leadership positions who were just struggling right then, and people wanted to bring in that couldn't do it. We're down to do it once a year now, because that's about the backlog we've got. We've run about 70 people through the thing, so we do it once a year now, about 10, 12 people, and that's about right for us. But when you start, if you can get the resources, we did one in the spring and one in the fall, and that seemed to be about the right iteration for us.
How big are you?
We're 350. We started the program, there were 3 of us who just sitting around one Saturday afternoon and got the idea for doing this. We sort of rotated out, and I'll talk about this again a bit later. And this is important once you start a course. What you don't want this to do is become somebody's pet rock. You know, so-and-so always does the leadership course. So we've been planning a phased withdrawal. Right? Ron and I have been trying to retire for a couple of years. We haven't quite made it yet.
Nobody lets us phase out.
That's right. But the first 2 of the original, we had 3 of us, and then we added 2 more, so we had 5 that kind of started. 2 of those 5 have moved on. One more is going to move on this year. Ron and I hope to do it over the next 2 years, and we brought 3 new people in. Generally graduates of the course will go back and say, how about helping us present next year? But it's a fairly, you'd be surprised, even though once you finish the course, it's fairly labor intensive to get it right. Our feeling is this ought to be one of the best things people do in your congregation. It ought to feel professional. It ought to be a lot of fun. It ought to run very smoothly. You ought to just think, oh, geez, this is pretty good stuff here. We don't like the phrase, you hear this a lot, well, you know, it's a volunteer effort. One of the things we try and teach in our course, that's not an excuse for poor quality, it's just the opposite. We're all here because we want to be here, and so you ought to have kind of a high standard for how you're doing stuff. And if you're going to ask a dozen people to give up basically their weekend, all Friday night and half a Saturday for you, they better have a good time and they better learn something here, or you have really done a bad thing to yourself. So anyway, the farm team, the idea is, and we haven't really gotten there yet, but we're sort of working on it. We'd like to get to the point where we've identified somebody that says, boy, we really think they've got some potential here, and get somebody to encourage them to get active on a particular committee, come take the course, take over the committee with the idea, I could see them on the program council in 2 years and the board in 3 years from now. We haven't got there. Right now, long-range planning for us is about Thursday, like it is for everybody else. But we'd sort of like to have a system, and we're working to try to do it. We spent a lot of time talking to the board, the program council, and the nominating committee, trying to identify people at different stages. I always, every time we put a new board slate together, 3 people come on every year, I'm always looking, so who's going to be the chair in 3 years? We're trying to get to the point as an institution where we're thinking, who's going to come on the board in 3 years, and what can I do to help them be prepared to do that? Don't tell them you're doing that, you'll scare them off. See where that goes. These are our course objectives. Pretty straightforward stuff. We're just trying to serve those who are trying to serve the congregation. We're trying to give them a good mix of practical information and resources and skills and tools. And you'll see when we go through the agenda for the course here, it really is a nice mix of practical things grounded on the church Leadership 101 for the people that need that, and every class is just a little bit different here. And some general things about how to work group dynamics here. We try to make sure we honor the 3 T's, their time, talent, and treasure that they've all contributed to help make the church possible here, and make sure they understand if you're going to be a leader, this is part of your portfolio also. By the way, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned, I have paper copies of all the slides, so I'll give those to you. And I'm going to give you a link. You can get the electronic versions of these as well. We are trying to build that community of leaders and mentors. We're starting to spend a fair amount of time talking to the real old hands like Ron and I, and say, so-and-so is really an up-and-coming. How about working with them? We do a lot of task force kind of projects. You just need 2 or 3 people to do something for 60 or 90 days. Very nice if you can get one of your old hands who's kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi and somebody new with a specific idea. I'm going to really help bring that junior leader along here. So we try to encourage that sort of stuff. And lastly, we're just trying to make this a living program. As I said, we've been doing this for about 3 years now. The course as it looks now in outline form looks pretty much like the original, but the content has changed a lot because the needs of the congregation has changed and the group has changed. We start recruiting for a class about a month and a half, 2 months out. Most people just can't predict their schedule much further than that. In fact, we're going to have a meeting here next week. We have a course coming up at the end of the month. We'll take a look at what our final roster looks like in about a week here and say, okay, based on this group, what modules do we need, maybe a little more, a little less, what should come out, what we want to do that actually fits people here. Don't always get it right, but we try to tune it for them here. Key elements we had for building the course here. And this has been one of our biggest challenges, working with the time that people can allocate. How much time you can ask for people to come in is a real challenge. And the model that we've settled on, and I'm not going to tell you it's right, it just generally works for us, is we ask people to come in on a Friday night, we feed them to dinner, we have a working session, get them out by 9 o'clock. We ask them to come back at 8:30 in the morning, we feed them again. You see a pattern here? We feed them again, and we go through noon. If we had our druthers for content, quite frankly, we'd go all day Saturday. There's a lot of stuff we'd like to cover. But our gut feel is there's just a limit on how much time people are going to give you. I have worked with other churches who do this like just on Wednesday night, 6 weeks in a row. It seems to work for them. Yeah, my experience is for most courses you tend to get a bit of drop-off and that sort of thing, and you don't get that intense group experience. People sort of come and go. So we sort of pack it in. For those of us who are facilitators, half of us hate Friday night, half of us hate Saturday morning, but it kind of works for the group here. So one of the things you want to think about is how much time can you ask of people and what looks like the best schedule. It's one of the things we always ask the group going out. Would you have preferred to have this over a couple of weeknights? Would you rather do all day Saturday, not Friday? What works for you? Most of them seem to, this screws up 2 days a little bit, but doesn't ruin the whole weekend. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Do you have a minimum number?
We do, yeah, and thank you for asking that here. Don't like to do this for less than 8, don't like to do it for more than 20. And the reason we do that, you'll see as we go through the schedule, we do a number of small group exercises, and it's just kind of hard to get any dynamic going with anything less than 2 or 3 groups of 3 or 4 people. And over 20, it just gets to be, everybody doesn't get time to talk. When we first started the course, we had a problem in the upper limit. We just had more people than we could run in. That's how we wound up doing the course twice a year. Now, because we've got most of the folks out, we tend to hit toward the lower Midland. The average course runs about 10 to 14. That's a pretty good number for us. We're pretty comfortable with that.
It's also very intensive because the team is 5 people and we're serving 6 people in some cases.
Yeah, you get your hand held a lot in this one here. We do try to tailor it. As I said, it's kind of a combination, some basic leadership and operational skills, some things specific to our church here, and some position-specific things. If you're going to be on the program council, here are things you particularly need to know about. If you're going to be on the board, here are the things you need to know about. So far, in most cases, we've been able to just work that into the general course so everybody knows what the other person's doing here. But if somebody's having real problems getting a grip on that, we're not averse to having one of us. Everybody in our facilitation team has done all these jobs. We've all been on the program council. We've all been on the board. We've all been on committees and task forces. So if somebody wants some extra time, we'll just sit down one-on-one with them and work through whatever they think they need here. We draw on a lot of sources. Most of us are trainers or educators by experience in our daytime jobs. We draw on lots of things from UUA. Our case studies we use now, for example, come out of the Harvest with the Power thing. We got a lot of things out of the Alban Institute in the early phases. I don't know if you've been on the Alban Institute website lately. Not quite so many things are free. We really want you to join here, so not quite as much, but still a pretty good source here. We all do lots of institutional best practices we bring from our professional skills. I'm a member of the International Mentoring Association. They send out lots of good stuff. We use that. In our own experience with the congregation, when we started this course, we all sat down, had dinner, a couple bottles of wine, and said, let's swap horror stories here. What has happened that if we had known better how to handle it, might not have been so bad? That was kind of the genesis of the course here. And we do a fairly wide variety of approaches for the amount of time we've got in here. There is some lecture, but it's really open discussion, seminar type of exercise, and a plenary discussion pretty well overlaps. We do some work groups and some practical exercises, and we do a couple sing-alongs here. If you ever heard me sing, you know this is not a good idea when I'm on the platform. But Ron's got great musical skills, keeps us out of trouble in that regard. But the idea is we really want to hit these three buttons here. We want people to understand the idea of service and stewardship. What's the point of being a leader in a congregation here? Understand the broader sense of community. I'll come back to that in just a minute here. And we want you to have some fun doing it. The community piece is an interesting thing because an awful lot of people that you're going to find who seem to have leadership potential probably focus in one area. They're really interested in social justice, or they're really interested in RE. And we think part of our mission is to make sure they understand how all those pieces fit together. And the fact that I don't have any kids and I don't have anybody in RE doesn't make any difference. It supports this community. So I want to understand how RE works, and I'd like to volunteer a little bit to get a piece of that action to understand how it goes. Teaching people to understand you're serving the whole community, not just the areas that you're particularly interested in. And we encourage them, by the way, at the end of this, go volunteer for something you've never done and you don't think you're interested in. It won't kill you to go do something a couple of times in an area you don't know. And very often that works out well for you. That's the model here. We really stress that here. The leader is servant. The idea is you're not here to run things, you're here to facilitate things. And in doing that, you're trying to get an end result that works for the congregation, and you're trying to mentor people to come along. We always tell people that the first two things you do when you take over things, start a continuity folder, so you're prepared to hand it over in an organized way to somebody else, and start thinking about, well, who's going to replace me? I literally start thinking about that the first day I take on a position here. So it's not one of these things where you go until you drop dead, or you can't get rid of it, or people think you've just been the person forever here. But the idea is, as a leader servant, you're running a good program, but you're also helping to grow your own replacement. It's a nice way to get it. One of the ways we bring that home to people, the idea that the leader servant here is, most people, when you come up to church and you have a dinner, what do you think? You think potluck, right? They don't get to touch a thing. The facilitators do all the cooking, all the serving, all the cleanup. We want you to concentrate on the course. This is hard to do. Some people cannot imagine that I have to wash the dishes. No, you don't. You're our guest for the next 2 days. Sit down and enjoy the course. We'll take care of all the housekeeping stuff. It's really hard for some people to do here. For some people, not hard at all, but for a lot of people.
As Bill said, we have a very generous team, and so we start at about 6 to 6:15. We usually say a few words about what the course is about, the sort of thing that Bill just said to you. And then they sit down and have a very nice dinner. We prepare for them. Everybody knows what they bring. Each other, the team knows who cooks what and so forth. My job is to make the scones on Saturday morning and so on. And then we start out, usually one of our team members asks them to introduce themselves to one another. That can really go long. They love to talk about themselves. We try to keep it brief. And then to ask them a few questions about what they think leadership is. Just going to talk about what would you call leadership? So forth. Get a little conversation going. We call people together into the meeting room, and we have a little panel. This has been sometimes a panel of ex-board chairs and so forth who came in just for that specific purpose to talk about their experiences. We think maybe the next time we run this, because each of us has held several positions in the church, the team itself will just have a few things to say about our own experiences. And then we turn to how we work together. That's the organization chart, and Bill's an expert in that.
Oh, yeah.
We'll come back to this in a moment.
This is a small but interesting point. When we first started putting this course together, we thought, not everybody knows how the church is organized, what all the functions are. Let's put the organization chart out. Well, frankly, none of us have looked at the chart for a long time. And the one we had looked like a plate of spaghetti on steroids that had been thrown against the wall. We could not figure it out ourselves. So we corrected it. We spent a lot of time working it, and it still just confused everybody. So it was our one tip to technology. The course does not rely on technology. But what we did, we found this was an easier way to introduce everybody. This is the understanding of governance most people have. It's just a blank sheet. We don't know what goes here. But we thought it'd be kind of interesting. So we want to talk about what are the guidance and the documents that run the railroad here, what tasks are done by professional staff, what's done by support staff, where do you have informal relationships, and where do you have coordination lines. And then we just filled those in. Instead of giving everybody one big piece of paper with 37 boxes on it, we just roll them out one at a time. So everything starts with the congregation. The congregation exercises its will through its mission and vision statement and through its bylaws here. We can have special meetings anytime the congregation decides you want to. We have particular committees that report to the congregation at large. A nominating committee, we could do a special committee for good news or bad news, and a ministerial search committee. Then we walk them over to the Board of Trustees and their responsibility for oversight, governance, and fiduciary responsibility, and they run primarily through the policies of the church here. The treasurer is an adjunct or an ad hoc member of the Board of Trustees. Some congregations they vote, some they don't, but they're almost always a part of the board in some fashion here. The board is responsible for the letters of agreement that let us hire the professional staff, the administrator, the music director, and the lifespan growth.
Lifespan spiritual growth.
I'm still getting over the RE thing here. We do that here. The administrator has an employee handbook that she uses to run the railroad with the support staff here, and includes mostly the office manager, the custodian, our property manager, a volunteer rentals coordinator who actually pays for the work that he or she does, and the volunteer receptionists plug into that relationship as well. We then talk about their assistants that help all these other folks here. And then, so we've talked a little bit about who has the ultimate authority, where the governance lies, where some of the administrative and operation goes. And we then go over and talk about programs, and we walk through the program council, which works primarily as the controlling body for the charters for all the committees and task forces in the congregation. We walk through each of these committees and task forces, what they do, and how they work together here. We bring the minister in. Sometimes we have an intern minister as well. And then if everything works right, those folks all coordinate with each other, and you have a harmonious relationship where everybody understands what the program council does, what the minister, the support professional staff do, and what the board does. That's about a 30-40 minute conversation when we actually do the course here, but it's much easier than trying to look at it all at once.
And that, of course, is just our own particular church's organization, the way we see it, and it's different for every church. And many people come to this workshop, and they don't understand that until we've talked it through with them. Back to the time schedule, how we work together and sometimes don't is the idea of that session. And then next we turn to financial issues. There's usually someone there to explain about the budget, how the budget is organized, and where the money goes, how things are allocated, those kinds of things. Those are the sorts of things we oftentimes take for granted. Somebody comes onto the board and they have no idea about that stuff.
Right. One thing we found that's useful to add, when most people think of financials for the church, they just think of the operating budget. This is a chance where you talk to them about your emergency reserve fund, about what you do with the endowment fund, if you have a major maintenance fund. If you do have an endowment, what are the rules for how it can be used, when it can be used, who makes that decision. But get people to think about more than just the operating budget. This is important because some of these people are going to be your visiting stewards also. And they need to understand it's more than just what we do to pay the bills every month, several pieces.
And finally, about this time, everybody is really getting bored. They had a couple of glasses for wine for dinner, and I say, time to have the rules and regs game. So let's have the game. Here are the rules. We put people into groups of 4 or 5 people each. Sometimes we have to count off to get, the groups. We distribute questions in writing, and the teams have 10 minutes to look over the questions. Then we have a wonderful time in which we have the teams answer the questions. The moderator, that's me, asks the questions. And we have some of the team members stand off the side with big numbers, and they grade every answer with a 1, 2, or a 3, or a 0, just like it's our own little
Olympics or dancing with the
yeah.
This is our version of
Olympics.
Dancing with the Stars. We hold your
A
paddle.
perfect answer is a 3. They have to cite the citation for why they've given the right answer. If they give the correct answer but aren't sure exactly where it comes from, that's a 2, and so forth. Barely acceptable is a 1, and so forth. If the members of the team don't answer correctly, the other team can answer. And if the participants don't answer, maybe one of the team members can answer. Of course, if we throw in a couple of questions once in a while, they're tricky, and if the team members haven't thought about it, they're not sure either. Let's have an example of one of the questions. I read this question to them. Board members are planning to have the annual meeting. One says, let's have wine with dinner. One says, oh, I don't know about that. I said, look, we do this all the time. It's a good idea. I'll even provide the wine myself in order to make it a good occasion. What is the answer? Can we do this? Your church may have its own answer to this question. Let's see our answer. The function must be primarily a social occasion. Alcohol may not be served in conjunction with worship or business functions. That is our particular policy. So it's helpful for board members. Now, they've been told before they come to that, here are all the policies. Now, I love policies. I could just read policies by the hour. Some people find it boring to read a whole policy manual. So they may not be right up on this, but if they've done their homework, they may be able to sit in their little group and say, I know the answer to that one. I think it's this policy right here, I believe. Or maybe it's this bylaw, number 6. I'm not sure.
And that's actually a very important point. Is it a bylaw or is it a policy? So get people used to the idea of what's the difference and who can change those and where do you find those. Very useful exercise.
Now then we wrap things up at the end of the evening, and I lead the group in singing a little song, and everybody goes home at 9 o'clock.
That's it. And then we bring them back in on Saturday morning.
Oh, yeah.
And as I said, so far, we've really been pleased. We've had, a few people that had schedule conflicts. In fact, it's interesting, we've got one for this course. She was here for the last course, could only do Friday, volunteered to come back and do the whole thing because she wanted to get that experience, so she's coming back.
She likes dinner.
Yeah, that's right. That free wine and dinner.
Okay, Saturday agenda. Again, we have a welcome, refreshments, and we sing people in. Of course, today will be a joyful day. And the first thing we do is, how do I? Now, when we start this thing, 3 or 4 years ago, we brainstormed, what should we do? We thought, well, maybe we should just think about how do people do things around here. So we started generating a list of questions. We now have developed answers for these questions. And in fact, how do I is posted on our website for anybody who wants to see it. That doesn't mean everybody has seen it. So let's see. We'll just, shall I go show them how do I right now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So there we go.
Here's an example. How do I request that furniture be set up for an event in a special way? Well, in our church, for routine meetings, most people just push the chairs around and set it up themselves. If it's an event, a big thing, a big room, you fill out a custom work order request for the custodian, and you put it in a particular mailbox. And it should happen that way. Back to the next session. Bill, you'd explain them.
Sure, yeah. So we sort of go from the sublime to the ridiculous. We do the, this is a whole session, all those little nitpicking things. Where are the candles? Where's the key for this? The fire alarm goes off on Sunday. Where's the box that sets it off? All that sort of stuff. To kind of get everybody thinking about just the nuts and bolts. And then we try to take them back a little bit and talk about, what are the principles for good leadership, particularly in a voluntary organization, particularly in a church. As I said, just on the facilitator team, we've got retired military, we've got educators, we've got business people. We all bring lots of leadership experience, all of which is useful, but all of which does not template exactly to a volunteer group or to a church. There's a little bit of a difference here. And so we try to hone day and in for people that you need to think about leadership. Principles are kind of universal, but how you apply them and which ones are most important are a little bit different for a church here. And so we've got a couple of folks who work that piece. We do a short section that's how do you do an effective bring your team together and how do you have effective meetings. And that's kind of a glorified checklist. We talk about how you do this for a regular committee. We talk about, it's one thing to have a committee meeting. It's another thing if you're hosting a town meeting for the congregation. 10 people doing something in a room is one thing. 150 people is a whole different bag of tricks to be working with there.
Maybe I shouldn't say this, but the thing we try to talk to people about is not to have a business meeting like we just had.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. In fact, one of the things we tell people, one of the ways you know you had a good meeting, you sort of hear how people are talking coming out of the parking lot. If at the end of the day you ended on time, everybody felt heard, you felt pretty good about the outcome, and you're not exhausted or frustrated, that's a good meeting. Some of that is just as simple. I'm a big fan, and we teach this in the course here. You don't call a meeting without sending out an agenda. You send out a draft agenda early, let everybody comment, do some input, and then when the meeting starts, you remind everybody. You start on time and you say, this is the agenda we talked about. If no one has any changes we need to do, this is the plan. We're going to finish at 9 o'clock tonight, and our objective is at the end of this is an informational meeting, this is a decision meeting, a brainstorm, but let's talk about what we're going to accomplish here. You do that right at the outset. So at the end, everybody knows what's coming, and everybody feels like they're pretty good. If you got something else good that comes up, you put it in the parking lot, and before we leave, we say, when can we take this back up? When would be a good venue to do this? But you don't let the meeting wander all over and people get tired. The break is just like the breaks here. The break time is not just a chance to go to the bathroom and get some coffee. It's a chance for people to sit and talk informally and share some notes. Or we find a lot of people kind of shy about asking a question. They will not raise their hand. They'll come up and talk to you when you're standing by the coffee pot. So we make a point to scatter ourselves out. We all sort of own a table when we're doing this course here. If you're not actually presenting, you go sit at a table. And we walk around and we're looking for people standing in the corner saying, how you doing? Got any questions? Anything you'd like to be doing differently to sort of draw people out here? And then we go into small groups for a case study. And some of us were talking about at the outset of the program here. We started out doing case studies based on real-life MVUC horror stories. And we don't tell people that at the beginning. We just give them a story. And most of them go, God, that's awful. I can't imagine that. So, well, if you'd have been here 6 years ago, you could imagine, because that actually happened. That sort of brings people's attention around. Lately, we've been drawing some case studies out of the Harvest for Power lesson plans. They've got some really good stuff on the UUA site here. But the idea behind the case study is doing two things. One, we're trying to teach people you just can't assume everything is going to go well. So if you're planning an event, it's kind of useful to think, what could go wrong here? And do a little thinking and planning for it so you're not trying to make up an answer when it first comes up here. And then when something does go wrong, give people some analytical tools to figure, okay, what's going on here? What's my real priority? What do I need to do? We used to have one where, gosh, we had a drunken member who showed up and a kid who fell into a fireplace all at the same time. Pick your target, Gene. You got lots of help here. Grab somebody, say, you go get that guy out of here. I'll be back over in a second. You go take care of the child, whatever it's going to be. But we give them a thing that's got varying degrees of complexity and issues in. Let them work it as a team, and then they all come back and we do a group presentation. And it's basically, what were the issues here? What were the pressures? What made this hard? What were your priorities? How did you decide to do that? And everybody, in a very friendly sort of ways, critiques each other's experience. If it turns out it was a real case study from the church, we'll tell them, this really happened here, and here's what happened, and we did pretty well, or we did pretty terrible, and we want to make sure you learn from that experience here. At the end of the course, we do a couple things we think are important. We do a little wrap-up and make sure everybody has time to share any feedback they'd like to share with the group at large, or see if there are any areas they're not clear on we talked about, so we can do some follow-up with them at a later time here. We're starting to build in now a what next. We're bringing a list of volunteer and leadership opportunities. We'd like to look at that. If something rings a bell, tell me today, and we'll connect you up with this. So, comment, question?
Yeah, question. Back on the principles section.
Yes.
You spend 30 minutes on that. You know, if you were to do an internet search on principles of leadership, you'd find a vast body of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's your source, or is there, you know, good...
Lincoln Cobb, who's our primary trainer for that, actually built an 8-hour course and then necked it down to 30 minutes worth of principles here and context we're doing. we've been thinking about, quite frankly, doing a whole separate course on principles of leadership, but we hadn't found the demands being that high. Actually, most of the people have had a little bit of experience here, but you'll see that I'm going to give you a link for all our slides, and you'll look through the whole packet here and just see. But it really is. I mean, it's one of the things we start out saying, this is really one over the world and goes pretty fast here, but we want you to understand there are some principles. The whole idea of honoring everybody's different experience, understanding people perceive things differently than you do, understanding the risk of triangulation and people bringing baggage and one issue people coming in. A little bit on conflict management. Don't let your meeting be held hostage by somebody with bad intent. You got to be able to step up as a leader and say, wrong format, wrong time, wrong issue. We're not doing that one right now. But you and I talk and break and we'll pick it up.
You said something really important earlier. You said almost everybody brings their own experiences.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes the principles is more of a review to put it into the context of the church.
That's right. Give you a little framework. That's exactly right. It's just amazing to me. I bet everybody in here has had the same experience. You have 100 people in a room and somebody says something on a controversial topic and everybody heard it differently depending on what they brought into the room in the first point. One of the things we talk about is you have to do feedback. What I heard you say was, did I get that right? And if you want to communicate something to somebody, you got to do it several times in several venues and several media or they're not going to get it. If there's anybody who hadn't had this experience, raise your hand. I'll bet nobody. You're working an important project in the church. You've been doing it for 6 months. It's been talked about from the podium. You put it in the newsletter. You put it in the email. It's in the comments. And the first person stands up and says, when did that come up? I've never heard that. I don't see any hands going up here. And so you just teach people, hey, that's really not bad intent. It just goes that way. You just got to do things 6 ways on Sunday. We spent a lot of time talking about retail communications. And the example we use for that is we had a capital campaign a few years ago. We spent about 1.5 years prepping for that. And we did some town meetings and we did some big meetings. But mostly what we did, we got the team who was working that project broken down. And we went to every single group in the church. I mean, if it was 2 people who met every Thursday, we'd say, could I have 15 minutes of your meeting? I'll come to you at your venue and your group and let me show you what we're doing and let me get some feedback. I'll be back in a few months to do that. We did that over and over again here. And so by the time we had the meeting for the vote, we knew how the vote was going to be within a couple of votes because we had just beat it to death in formats that people were comfortable with. One of the things we teach people, if you're doing a town meeting or a congregational vote and you don't know what the vote's going to be, not time for the meeting. You haven't done enough communication. I'm sorry, there was a, sir.
Yeah, how closely do you work with the nominating committee? I mean, could somebody be nominated for a position that hasn't gone through this course?
Yes. In fact, we're going to come to that again toward the end here. They can. We meet a couple times a year with the nominating committee now. The first thing they get when the committee gets formed, we're getting ready to have our annual meeting in May here. The new nominating committee will get formed. One of the first things they get is a roster of everybody who's been through the course. But it's not a precursor. You could have somebody who's just a really good fit, right time to do it. We'll run them through the course for this year. For example, we know who's getting nominated this year. We have a couple of people that haven't been through the course. They're going through the course at the end of this month. They've been told, you're going to be nominated, we expect you to do, we'll try and catch you.
At least try and do it after they've taken the position.
Yeah, if we can't get them before, we'll get them after. But the way it works for us, we generally do the course in April. We do the meeting in May. They take their position in July. So they still get it sequenced in an okay fashion. I feel better if they had the course before.
We have occasionally had a nominating committee that felt they needed to be independent of everybody else.
Yeah.
Because they're elected by the congregation. They don't want anybody telling them what to do. And yet we would like them to at least think about these things as they choose a future leader.
That's the same sort of nominating thing. He says, I don't want anybody to influence me, so I'm not going to talk to the minister or the board about who's getting nominated. Really? Yeah. Boy, we're all going to live with that one for 3 years. So we do a little what next, what some of the opportunities are, and encourage people to pick up and do some interest on that one, talk about the opportunities to serve. We do, Ron mentioned the game where we evaluate people. We didn't tell you, this is one of the places where we get really campy and have some fun. Remember the dating game?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're in the middle of this thing on Friday night, and Ron says, it's time for the rules and regs game. And the dating game song comes up here. Starts blasting out, and we do all that sort of stuff. When graduation comes, everybody goes out of the room to another room in the building, and they sit down with one of the facilitators. We do a little round table. How'd the course go? How did it work for you? You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings. We'd like to hear how you're going. And there's kind of a long questionnaire that they all get to go through and give us some written feedback. And we'll spend the next week or two going through that stuff, see what's going on. While they're doing that, we clear out the main room, get all the furniture out. And when they finish the questionnaire, they're all asked to line up in alphabetical order. The door opens, and pomp and circumstance.
William Clontz.
That's right. And they all come out, everybody gets a certificate, we do a group photo, and we're out by noon. People just have a great time where they can't believe we're doing pomp and circumstance. You're going to walk across the stage if you do that. People have a good time. And then the cycle just starts over again. We go through we'll give ourselves a week or two of downtime, and we'll go through the course critiques. Lincoln has designed a really good set of critiques, and we sort of cross-reference what's going here, and we try to get a feel for what's going on. Everybody's not going to love everything, and that's perfectly fine. But we make a point of time, look, if there's something you didn't like, you really need to share that with us, or we're going to inflict it on the next person here. And occasionally you'll get something, interesting, but no, I don't think so. But more often than not, somebody brings something up, it's probably a pretty good point, and we try to incorporate it in the course. And by the way, if we do that, we call that person back. Now, it had a really good point. If they want to sign it, they don't have to sign their name. Sometimes we get more honest. But if they sign it and they make a suggestion, we'll call them back. Darn good idea. Thank you for that. That's now in the next course. Please.
This sounds really fun, and
It is. We have a great time doing
what
it.
you put together. But as an educator myself, I'm wondering what you might see as a need, or you've already developed, for accountability.
Yes. Good point. Boy, where do we start on that one? That really is the issue here.
I told you somebody might ask that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In fact, Ron used to be an educator. Well, just take that.
Because
It's a joke.
you can lay everything out, and you can even get them to buy off on it most of the time.
Yeah.
But the real proof of the pudding is that they can change their behavior or their mindset,
Yeah.
and they can function in those new principles that you've laid out.
Yeah,
for
that's
them.
exactly right. And we really don't have very precise terms and measurements. But we do have a couple of these. One of the things we're looking for, if people who are in leadership positions start doing things a little differently, we spend a fair amount of walking around time on the Hill just to see how things are going here. Or they'll come up and say, gee, I never volunteered to lead anything, I'll do that. Probably the best indicator we've had in the last 2 years, the board has told us, boy, the new guys really hit the ground running. Much better. It used to be you spent about the first quarter. I mean, come on, we've all been there. The first time you're on a board, you look at the budget sheet, you can't figure out what that is, but you're not going to raise your hand and say, I don't know how to read this thing. You're just going to, oh, well, yeah, it's very interesting. And hope nobody asks you a question. It's just like being back in high school again. So what we're finding is, I mean, so far it's anecdotal, but a couple boards in a row said, geez, we can really tell a difference. Now, what's nice, if we get somebody that has not been through the course, doesn't particularly want to go to the course, they get a call from the board chair and the minister saying, we'd really like for you to do this. We think you'll find it'll equip you a lot better. Don't have to do it. I mean, we're at the end of the day, we use here, but they're strongly encouraged to do it.
But as we started to talk about a moment ago, there are a couple of next steps we'd like to do ourselves. This connection up with the nominating committee is one of them that we want to continue to work on and try to get there in coordination. But we also see things like mentoring and so on, which we haven't set up yet.
Right. In fact, so at the end of the day, here's what we're trying to do. If you grow good leaders and the course goes well, we've done a pretty good job of role modeling. We've actually run the course with good UU principles, only we start on time and get stuff done here. We try to encourage people to understand, look, you really do, even though you may not think of yourself as a big deal leader. If you run something, people sort of look to you for guidance. How's this going to be? I always find it interesting. UUs are just really a contrary bunch by nature. But by and large, most congregations I've been in, if a board comes forward and says, we looked at this really hard, our best judgment is we ought to do this, most congregations are willing to trust their leadership when you come down to it. We'll make it hard for them up until the vote, but we tend to trust them here. And so remind people, you really have to take that into consideration. People are trusting you to do the homework and do this thing right. We're very big on leadership by example. In our church, board members have a blue name tag. And one of my favorite sayings is, if there's an event of any importance in the church, there ought to be a couple of blue name tags there. You show up and say, I support this. to part the church dinner or working on the grounds or working on the book sale, I want to see some blue name tags in there. And if you're a committee chief and it's in a functional area that's important to your committee, you ought to be showing up and thanking the people that are doing the work and saying, I'd like to build a little sweat equity with you here. So we do that to them. We try to practice our covenant principles. Well, like most of it, we have a covenant for meetings and a covenant for the congregation. We walk through those and say, it's not just paper, that's really how you want to do business. Those are important when the tension starts going up. You got to remember, hey, we have a covenant for doing this kind of thing. You as a leader got to be the one who brings that in here. We try to stress to people, you got to be committed to doing a quality job. The most irritating phrase in the English language is, it's volunteers who do the best we can. I don't buy that. We're volunteers. This is where we said we wanted to be. We ought to be really knocking ourselves out to do a good job. It's not, I didn't get drafted to do this. I said I'd do this. So do a good job at it. Be a little hard on yourself in terms of saying, I'm really going to do the best job I can. Because other people rely on me to do that. We really try to install that value in them here. And just remember, once you've taken up a leadership post in anything, you're effectively a lay minister. You own a piece of the obligation and the future of the church here. We talk a lot about generational stewardship. We tell people, it's a trick question. If you ask most people, who owns the church? They'll say the congregation, right? Not the minister staff. And we always tell them, that's 1/3 the right answer. This church belongs to all those people who built it that you never knew that made it possible for you to do what you're doing. The current congregation and people you don't even know yet that are going to inherit what you're doing. If you keep that in mind as a leader, you're going to do the right thing. You're taking something that was entrusted to you, you're going to try and make it better and pass it on to the next person. If you look at your leadership responsibilities that way, you're going to do a good job. We spend a fair amount of time on group dynamics. I know nobody has ever had anybody who was a problem in any of your meetings, right? No troublemakers, right? You all get along. I once went to a seminar at GA on handling conflict. And I'm not making this up. Somebody stood up from a church in the Midwest and said, we have no conflict in our congregation. And I said, really? She said, yep. As soon as somebody gets mad, they just leave. One way to do it here. But we do spend a fair amount of time, and it's kind of woven through all the modules. Look, you're going to have people that are going to be difficult on a given day. They may have a secondary agenda. I bet you've all seen this. I've had somebody join the committee to help kill an idea. They didn't want to go here. So you got to talk to people and say, look, you assume the best until they prove the worst. When they prove the worst, you got to be prepared to deal with that. You're protecting the time, talent, and the atmosphere for everybody else. So don't be afraid of calling signals on somebody who's doing the right stuff and running the atmosphere for everybody else. I haven't done it often, but a few times I've gone to somebody and said, the meeting's just not a good fit for you. You just need to find another place to serve. This is not working. It's not good for you. It's not good for the community. I thank you for your service, but you need not to do this again. That's okay. You shouldn't have to do that often, but that's what's necessary that you do that. All right, here's the results we've got to date here. We've got a little over 70 of our people who've gone through it, so a pretty good number for our base here. Went from 2 courses a year to 1, which is about the right pace for us at this point here. This came up about a year and a half ago, not long after we'd started it. Most of you are familiar with the UUA listservs, the one on leadership. Somebody posted a question, hey, we're trying to get a leadership course started. Anybody got anything? And foolish guy that I was, I said, we just started something a few months ago. It seems to be going pretty good. Be happy to share it with you. We got flooded with requests. And some gentle soul down in Florida said, I run an FTP. Why don't you send me the slides and people can download it. We could count something like 23 congregations and 2 districts downloaded that little thing here. I don't know what they all did with them here, but it just told me we're all looking for good ideas. And I have borrowed lots of leadership slides from other people as well here. We're starting to get people asking for specific opportunities to serve because they feel like they could do it coming out of the course here. As I mentioned, the BOT says we're doing a little better here. And we're starting to rotate out our facilitators. Like I said, my goal is really 2 years from now. None of the original team is here, and a whole new generation has picked it up here. So it's got some life to it here. What's next? We added a conflict management seminar this year. We've got several people in the congregation who do this for a living. There's some good programs from the UA as well, but we have people this is literally what they do for a living. So we just finished doing our first iteration of that one. and it's really based on individual conflict management. We're prototyping NOAA now that's institutional conflict management. What if the program council and the board aren't getting along? What if your committee and the staff aren't getting along? Trying to work those pieces out. One of the things you might want to think about, if you've got a leadership training group or function who does this, is doing this kind of thing, sponsoring other courses. That you're saying facilitators don't do it, you just bring some other people in and do it and say, but as part of our mantle for doing leadership training, we'll help put together a course to do that. We've got, I think, a pretty good model for doing that. If somebody wants to offer a course, or we solicit them to do a course, we ask them to give us a program of instruction, show us what it is you think would fit, what are your resources, how do you want to do this, and then we'll bring together a dummy group, give us the course. Let's run through. We did that for ourselves. When we first built this course, we recruited all our spouses and about 8 or 10 other people and said, we'd like to screw up your weekend. How about going through this thing and tell us what we had? And we took that criticism. This gets to the question about the nominating team. We have been slow to do this. I know a lot of congregations here have already done this. That your leadership training, your nominating committee are one. It's absolutely the way to go. We've just been slow getting here, but I'm convinced that's really a smart way to go. One integrated function. Yes.
Where's your mandate then? If it's not through NOMCON, where is it?
This is interesting. When we first started this thing, like I said, literally 3 or 4 sitting around and think, we think we need to do this. We sent a memo to the program council and the board and said, we'd like to offer this up and run it for a year and see how it goes. What do you think? Is that okay? We said, yep, go do that. At the end of that, we then created a charter and sent it in to the board and the program council and said, we'd like to make this a standing body, and this year we reorganized some pieces in the church. We now have a membership council instead of a membership committee, and we've tucked that piece into that one. Nominating, if we blend with nominating, the mechanics are going to be a little interesting for us because our nominating committee is responsive to the congregation. We'll have to figure out how that goes, but I think it's a terrible thing. Did you have a...
Oh, well, I do have a comment about, since you've got some history doing this and some numbers, like you said, 70 people going through it, at some point to be able to show of the people that have gone through it, how many of them have actually moved into a position, that'd be very powerful information too.
It would be. And we're thinking, Ron tried to get one organized last year, we all just ran out of airspeed, altitude, and time. We wanted to get an alumni group together. We've had small groups, but we would like to bring everybody that's still around back to do one of these things. So we're still working on that piece here. And we still haven't really developed our farm team system. I'd really like to get to the point where I can look 3 years ahead and we're running people through it, but we're not quite there yet. Again, I've got the slides for you. These are our points of our email addresses. These are all addresses in Dropbox. Some of you are familiar with the Dropbox software. You don't. All you have to do is put this address into your browser. You click on it, and depending on how your program is set up, the slides will either appear on your computer, or it'll go into your.
You'll get a copy of this.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, you've got a couple of them. Or it'll go into your download box, and you can open it up. You have. I'll get you quick. So you're going to find 3 things in there. The slides from this presentation, I'm going to give you paper copies today also. A facilitator's guide, if you're putting something like this together, we did this for the export version, we sent you up some things to think about when you're setting it up, and a copy of the slides from the course we did last year. If there's anything in there you'd like to use, you're welcome to do it. Sorry, please.
I guess down the road, have you thought about a refresher course?
Yeah, we have, and frankly, we hadn't gotten around to it. Although what we're finding, I think we've got 1 or 2 in this course who went through the original course. They're just voluntarily coming back through the city. We'd just like to do the whole thing again. See where that goes. Yeah, it's a good thought.
One thing that we did not expect when we started doing this is we thought that it was all on content. But people love it for the socialization experience it provides them. They really connect up.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, the free wine doesn't hurt either. All right. Sir, last question.
I'm assuming you have separate training for RE. Is that true?
Yeah, we do. RE does their own thing. Now, having said that, people that are on the RE council come into our training.
Right.
The basically, but yeah, the RE community does their own thing. Secret handshakes and all that stuff. All right, we've got a group dancing for the room here.
More questions out in the hall. We'll be glad to talk with you.
Sure, absolutely. We've got paper copies back on the back there. Feel free to give them. If you've got any questions you want to ask Our email address is on there. Please do it. Be happy to send you electronics or anything else. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.